Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Realistic Pokemon Experiment, the second in a three-part series where I redraw each of the Kanto Pokemon as if they could exist in the real world, using realistic shading, informed texture, reference, and the knowledge of stylization and its effects on a design to basically reverse engineer what the intended real-life look would be. Now, I say three-part mini-series as if there's any question that I'll be going and doing all 151 based on the response that I got in the comments from the first part of the series. Everybody seems to want more, so who am I to tell you no? So today, as a second of many parts, I don't know how long this series will actually take, doing basically one evolution line per video, we take on the second evolutionary line in the Pokedex, Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. It's pretty obvious due to the design and the real-world inspiration that Charmander is a salamander, based on the commonly widespread medieval myth that salamanders are born from the remains of burnt trees. However, seeing as Charmander has some distinct anatomical dissimilarities with real-life salamanders, drawing a salamander with a match strapped to its tail would be a disservice to the design. Designing my interpretation as more of a baby dinosaur, the legs took anatomical inspiration from both human and reptile origins, and the torso from bird species. When it comes to color, I want to try to, if not completely use the original color palette, then at least make an approximation of the palette. It's important to know that the effects of stylization don't just stop at physical shape, but extend to all aspects of the design, including color. In the case of Charmander's skin, I saw no reason not to use the original orange, but with Charmander's eyes, the bright azure blue seemed a touch too unrealistic. In real life, blue eyes are caused by the lack of melanin in an iris, so in reality, when you're seeing blue eyes, you're actually seeing colorless ones. And although they appear blue due to other circumstances that I don't fully understand, I do know that real blue eyes appear shifted more towards the silver-gray side of the spectrum. So after a rework, that's what I gave Charmander and its evolutions. When it comes to texturing, I used a different technique on each evolution, all involving the scale pattern brush on Krita, a brush I see being very useful for at least the Kanto Pokemon in the future. Using this brush, I added not only highlights but also hints of a more burnt tone orange to maybe hint physically at how Charmander's evolution will change color. The fire tail went through a few iterations, and I actually slightly redesigned it after I was done recording, due to how I rendered Charizard's tail. Instead of designing it as a match-like flame like I originally tried to do, I allowed the tail to more naturally fade into the fire, using its scales and the gaps between them like hot coals. This helped the tail not just appear to be on fire, but actually look like the fire was actively originating out of it. So this is my interpretation of Charmander, the lizard Pokemon. Moving on to Charmander's evolutions, we first have Charmeleon, the sort of odd ones out when it comes to the Charmander-Charizard iconography. Carrying over the bipedal biology from the first form, designing the leg musculature for each of these was a challenge, as no existing creature in real life has an anatomy exactly like this. The more beak-like head and single horn took on an almost pterodactylan look, which, for where the design is going, actually fits quite well. The tail I made bulkier and more muscular, like a crocodile's tail, as it would have to realistically have more muscle to internally support its larger size. You'll find that this will end up being the case for a lot of these designs going forward, that a major difference between the original and the realistic version will either have thicker necks or limbs so that they look like they can realistically support themselves. In each of these, I tried to make the fire feel further integrated by being mindful of the lighting and where the red hued reflection lights would fall. I didn't want to make a stray shadow in an area where the fire would be nearby. That's another important thing when making these more realistic inspired designs, is that in real life, there's often more than one light source hitting an object, and this can mean that shadows can become complex and unpredictable very fast. Keeping all of this in mind, I kept the fire from looking like a tacked-on afterthought, as I imagine it's so easy to do. So here is my interpretation of Charmeleon, the flame Pokemon. Moving on to the final evolution, Charizard, we see even more examples of real-world anatomy morphing this design in order to give it a sense of biological realism. Like many depictions of long-necked sauropods, you will see that the upper neck can actually be as wide as or wider than the head itself to allow for the strong musculature to lift the heavy skull and brain case. The same goes for the tail, which is way thicker than the original. I tried to keep the face as close as possible to the original, as the face is of course the most recognizable part of any design including Pokemon, and I feel like if you don't get that right, at least in spirit, it can end up feeling like a completely different character rather than a redesign. That being said, I allowed for some more crocodilian anatomy to creep in where it made the face feel less cartoonish. Another big change was in the wings, as Charizard's wings are way too small to support its big body in flight. So I upsized them dramatically, still probably not enough to achieve realistic lift, but enough so that it wouldn't look unrealistic. I also took reference from bat wing anatomy to build their look and make them look more structurally sound, if that makes sense. This is the approach that many designers take when they create modern-day dragons, and judging based on Charizard's appearance in the games and anime, it's obviously a classic modern fantasy dragon, no matter what its typing suggests. As a novel inclusion to add to me explaining my thought processes behind these designs, I'd like to make a few observations about what actually living with these Pokemon might be like, as of course one of the main draws of Pokemon is the idea of living with a small band of fantasy creatures. Like in real life, how when taking on an exotic pet, there might be a few things that you might not consider at first, I think those unexpected ideas might be fun to speculate about. With a Pokemon like Charizard, I'd imagine that it would be too dangerous to have in most houses due to the open flame on its tail. So it'd probably be more of an outdoor pet, maybe building it a flame-resistant doggy house in the backyard. Additionally, I feel like Charizard would have a strong smell similar to if you left the gas to your stove turned on, and you get that particular smell that they add to natural gases. I think this is because I once heard a theory that Charizard probably has a methane gas-producing organ that expels flammable gases out of its tail so that it can be properly vented when it's not breathing fire out of its mouth. Which, though yes, saying Charizard would realistically smell like a manure patch might be gross, I think that a more pleasant natural gas like propane or similar gases used to heat our homes would be more pleasant. Who knows though, maybe Charizard does smell awful, but I'd like to think that it doesn't. So after all that, here's how I imagine Charizard, the flame Pokemon. So here are my interpretations of Charmander, Charmeleon, and Charizard. I'm personally pretty happy with them, but you'll have to tell me what you think in the comments below. Additionally, feel free to give me more feedback on the series as a whole, and tell me what you predict some of the more outlandish Pokemon might look like. As always, a special thanks to my patrons STE, Alan Michael White, and Vex for supporting this project and the others like it on the channel. If you would like to join them in helping support the John Machine channel and help make it possible for me to release these videos more often, you can sign up at the link in the description for as little as $3 a month. But as always, that'll do it for now. Next time, expect Squirtle and its evolutions. But until then, thank you for watching. If you liked this video, then leave a like, and if you want to see more like it, then subscribe and turn on the bell to get notified when I upload next.